Used to be a hustler. I used to be a runner. Came from the gutter. Now we be on that struggle. Used to be in a life full of crime. I gotta hustle and do whatever it takes to survive up in the jungle. Talking rock bottom from the gutter. I used to get in trouble, but now I'm beyond the struggle.
Hey everybody, this is Mark with Beyond the Struggle. I am here this evening with Renee. Renee, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good.
Hey, so Renee, we're going to do an interview and we're going to go ahead and go back in time a little bit about your recovery, your addiction and your life and stuff like that, and your sobriety, where you're at in your life now. And also at the end, you had sent me some pictures of the storyline that you're going to put together for everybody, and I'm going to post those pictures. I'm going to try to post them with the video if I can get in there, and maybe even give you and edit them in there, or at worst case scenario, we'll just post them at the end of the video. So everybody make sure whoever's going to be watching this to stick around. At the end of the video, there'll be all the pictures of the stuff that she's talking about throughout this whole video. And then we'll go from there. So take it away.
All right. Well, my name is Renee. And I'm definitely an addict. I'm an alcoholic. I am a child of addicts. My parents was both heroin addicts. They had two kids, my older sister, who's about 8 years older than me. And my mom and dad had me and my sister for about a year. And we were sitting outside in a vehicle with the getaway driver. And to feed their addiction, they would steal, and they were stealing from a department store, and they came running out. And, we leave, and me and my sister end up in DHS custody because both my parents go to prison. And that was at 1.
Okay.
I was 1 year old. And my dad, he passed away in prison. He had a brain aneurysm. I was also told it was a drug overdose, so I don't know if maybe it was both. But that's something I'll never really know. And then my mom went in, and me and my sister got picked up by my grandmother from DHS a little ways after we'd been there, probably 6 months or so, maybe a year. And my grandmother, she was born in 1925. She had six younger brothers. She took care of all of them, growing up. She was a very hard woman, and she'd been through a lot. And she took us in. Well, there was just a lot of corporal punishment, I guess you could say. There was a lot of abuse and just mistreatment, and you could tell we weren't really wanted. And so my sister went through a lot of physical abuse that I witnessed, which caused me to be extremely scared of my grandmother. And I had my incidences myself, but it was around second grade. I want to say that's like eight years old or so. My mom gets released from prison, and in my head, now that I've been through what I've been through, I can kind of relate to her. I'm like, okay, she's trying to do right. She's trying to do better. And she came and picked up my sister from my grandma's house. She left me there. And she ended up having to take my grandmother to court to get custody of me again. So the court granted her custody after my sister's testimony of the abuse. And so I went with my mom and my sister, and, that lasted about a year. And then she took me back to grandma, and my sister didn't come with me. It was just me. And so I went back to the same home, the same abuse, same stuff. Only this time, my papa had passed away. He had been in a semi-truck accident that, he drove a little itty bitty pickup truck, and the semi truck went over the back end of his truck and decapitated him. And then not but a couple months before this happened, and this is all during the year that I wasn't with my grandmother, but their 2-story home burns down. Now I'm saying all this because it sets the stage for her mental capacity at the time. My grandmother went through a lot. And after all of this trauma, and then she gets me back, she stayed on the couch. I took care of the house. I took care of everything. From third grade on, I was responsible for a lot. And, my mom, it wasn't very long after I went back to grandma that my mom went back to prison. My sister stayed out there, and, my mom, she got diagnosed with breast cancer. And when I was 15, she passed away in prison from breast cancer, which put me and my grandmother through a hard time. It's hard to understand because it was kind of like in my head, my savior was gone. She was supposed to come save me and get me out of this house. And, I just dreamed of the day that my mom and my sister would show up and take me away from there. And it was like that was gone, and so I spent a lot of years, visiting before whenever she was in there. And so I've been in and out of the prisons from a different point of view. I'm the child of I'm the child of it. And so, anyways, so after she passed away, my niece and my nephew got placed with us, which you remember, like, my girl's not doing a lot, so I'm taking care of them. And I end up, I had started smoking marijuana at 11, and then I had experimented with alcohol some, but I didn't start going really hardcore till I was about 15, 16. And about right after my mom died.
When you say hardcore, what are you referring to? Like, you're talking about?
Well, just like meth,
Okay.
meth and acid and mushrooms, or anything I can get my hands on other than heroin. I stayed away from heroin just because I knew I would have like a already generational addiction to it. Not that it has its own, but
Right.
anyways, and I didn't start shooting up till I was about 20 or so, but that would definitely be whenever I was the most hardcore, on it all. But
so you were about 15. Let's go back to 15 real quick. So when you were 15 is when you started using heavier drugs, you said. So finish painting us the picture at 15, and then we'll go up to when you started getting.
At 15, I got I found a lump in my breast, and I told my grandmother about it, and she didn't want to accept it because that's how my mom died with breast cancer. And so I went to the doctor on my own, and they wanted to do a biopsy, and they wouldn't do it without her permission. So I called her to get her permission, and she basically told me to go F myself. And so I felt completely alone and helpless and sick of everything, that I lived in my vehicle. I had a little Jeep Cherokee, and my junior and senior year, I lived in my vehicle. I went to friends' houses for showers. I did, my friends was my family, and my grandma at any point in time, she could have called the car and stolen, or she could have called me in as a runaway or got me home, but she never got me home. She didn't care. She just was done. And I was done. And so I just went buck wild. I was very sheltered, and I didn't do a lot. I spent a lot of time alone. And so once I was able to get out and free, and I just, and when I say buck wild, I was dancing at 18. I was doing that for 5-6 years, and I was selling more drugs than I was dancing. But I struggled trying to find places to live, and I couldn't keep a job otherwise. My first time I got arrested, I was 18. It was for burglary and grand larceny. And that was all due to my addiction. I was trying to feed my addiction and feed myself, that survival mode that we get in. I stayed in it for a long time.
Did they give you some time for that?
No, I didn't. I did time served in county.
So you really did.
And so the first time I went to jail, I stayed in county for a while.
So you really didn't even get a real break, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And so, it was a couple years after that, and I ended up in trouble in 3 different counties in Oklahoma. And I had, 3 different cases, and the way they were timed, they couldn't mess each other up. So they all kind of corresponded with each other. And so I had to pay all of them and have all the probation officers. But that's whenever I tried to, was clean. I had stopped using meth, but I was drinking, and I was using pills, and I was doing whatever was in front of me otherwise, just because I was away from the meth. And that's such a big lie that we tell ourselves whenever we think that, oh, well, Diet Coke's better than Coke. No, you know what I mean? Like, one drug isn't better than the other, and it's not, I thought I was doing okay. And I did that for 5 years. I got in as a manager at McDonald's. I figured I went from stripping to McDonald's. I was like, okay, I know I can flip a burger. You know what I mean? Like, I'll just go flip a burger. It'll be fine. And so I did. I just went to McDonald's, and I ended up being pretty good at McDonald's. And so they made me manager. And so I worked as management for several years until I ended up pregnant. Now, mind you, during my addiction, I got pregnant a couple of times. I had a couple of abortions, and that was really hard. But at the time, the life choices I was making, it was a life and death decision. There was a lot to everything that was going on. And so I found myself pregnant. And this time I thought, oh, I got a good job. I'll be okay. I can have this baby. Well, when I go to see if it's boy or girl, or, the doctor's appointment, there was no heartbeat.
Okay. So
they did a DNC and removed the baby. And I was mad. I was mad at God, I was mad at God growing up because I really felt like I got the raw end of things. But, with mom passing, I got closer to God. But with this miscarriage, I felt like because I wanted it, I deserved it, And so it really hurt me. And within a week, I quit my job. I told my boss to go F himself, and I shot up dope. I went right back to doing meth. And, I struggled until finally somebody that's close to me got me a one-way ticket. He actually, I found out today, he actually bought me 2 tickets, because the first one, I got to the airport and I was so messed up that I couldn't get on the plane. And so he bought me a whole nother ticket, But I got out to California, and I showed up. My sister was out there, and I showed up at her house, just out of nowhere, like, hey, I'm here. And I'm the type of, you'll see in the pictures, I'm the type of addict or meth addict that I will pick at your skin and rip the skin off and bleed and just all of it. And so I showed up in California a hot mess. I had a big sized abscess on my face. I had open sores all over, and I was not in a good shape. I was detoxing off the meth and detoxing off everything. And I got clean other than alcohol, and so I can't really even say I got clean, but I can do the quotations again, I guess. But I hadn't had my period, and so I went and I got a pregnancy test, and I found out that I was pregnant again. And this time I'm in California, I'm off meth, I'm healthier. I was in my head thinking I was doing all right. I'd gotten a GM job on the beach at a McDonald's in Lindmar, California, or on Lindmar in Pacifica, California. And, that McDonald's had a surfboard in it, that was so cool. But, sorry if I lost track.
Okay. So you're pregnant?
Yes, I found out I was pregnant with Skylar. And since he has a name, he's here. So I went through the pregnancy. I lived with my sister. She was there when he was born. I got induced for a couple of days, and he did not want to come out. Well, one thing that's always bothered me, everybody would be like, oh, it's mom's birthday or Sue's birthday, or reminding me of the people that's passed away, their birthdays and stuff. And I just hated that because I didn't want to feel sad all the time. I felt sad enough in my life, and so I'd always be reminded, well, whenever the doctors finally decided I could have a C-section with my son, it was like 2 hours until my mom's birthday. So I said, well, can we wait till after midnight? So now my mom and my son have the same birthday, so now instead of being sad on her birthday, I celebrate.
Yeah.
We have a big party,
Awesome.
we have a beautiful life. Yeah, no, it's amazing. And so I was out in California with Skylar, and I felt pretty alone. My sister had her own life she was living and stuff. And I went right back to drinking. I, for some reason, thought, I could handle it or whatever, those delusions we tell ourselves. And I ended up blacked out drunk and came to in a dope house in a room full of meth addicts, and I'm like looking around, and all I can think is, how did I even get here? Like, it's already too late. I'm already high, but I was a blackout drinker, and so, and it was Thanksgiving. It was freaking Thanksgiving. And, I knew that I had to do something different. I knew that I didn't want to put my kids through the stuff that I went through. I knew that I want to be here, but I started to find out that I couldn't stop on my own. I couldn't. I needed help. I kept trying to make things work, and I moved back to Oklahoma thinking, well, I had more support out here. And I come out to Oklahoma and I end up pregnant again. And his name is Axel. And, I ended up off meth again right before I found out I was pregnant. And by God's grace, and had a beautiful little boy. So after I had my youngest son, me and the father of my youngest son, we tried to make it work for a little while, but I went right back to drinking again, and he drank. And so the combination of the two was just it don't work. No, I'd come to the next day, and I'm not blaming anybody but myself. I have no idea what happened. All I know is what I woke up to. And what I woke up to the next day was a big hole in the wall, bruises on my back, broken kids' stuff, just a whole disarray. And I'm sorry, but if that's how mad we get around each other, we don't need to be around each other. So I made the decision to leave, and I left with my children. And I struggled, man. I struggled real bad. And eventually I ended up back on meth again. Only this time things changed, because this time, the father was around for my youngest son. He wasn't going to have it. He did an emergency custody on me and took custody of my youngest son. And to this day, I thank him for that. I am not mad about it. I'm just thankful somebody is out there that loves my son as much as I do. It was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever been through. But you know what? It got me into treatment. I went into treatment. I went into a long-term facility. I didn't have my kids till I was 30. So, I was 32.
That sounds good.
32, 33, something like that.
So now you're going into treatment?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I went into a treatment center where I could bring my kids. I didn't ever know that was even a thing, but I was able to bring my kids, my oldest with me. My youngest was with his dad. But as soon as I got in there, I got my visitation. I got time with them. We went through court, and I represented myself in court until trial, and then I lost. But after years of living my life different and proving myself in a way, I have joint custody today of my youngest son, and I'm proud of that. And but anyways, so I went to treatment. I stayed 6 months. And there I got to work through some of my trauma, some of my stuff, and really started to see who and what was the problem. And it wasn't everybody else.
Go figure.
It was me.
Go figure, right?
Right. Yeah. And so I was definitely the problem. And I left treatment, or I graduated from treatment, and I went into sober living. I went to sober living for like a year and a half, 2 years. And it was a really nice, place. And, I did everything I was supposed to do. I went through the motions. I worked a program. I went to meetings. I had a sponsor. I did the whole 9 yards. I kind of go big or go home, and I did the same thing using, I went big or I went home, but I got to do the same thing in my recovery. And so I went to sober living, and then after sober living, I got into my own place, and that was, a good 7-8 years ago. And so I've been in my own place ever since,
Okay.
and so that's pretty cool. I had, 2 years and I relapsed, and then I got another year. And one of the big things that I did whenever that happened was I reached out, I reached out to the community. We had started a recovery meeting at my church, and I reached out to the leadership team, and everybody showed up to my house. And, it's just so important to have a community of people surround you and to be lifting you up and to be pouring into you and to be a part of your life. We're built for community. We're built to help each other, And so I I ended up in my own place, thank goodness. And I ended up getting in with Sonic. I also got my associate's degree at Rose State, but I also got in with Sonic, and I became a general manager at Sonic. And I did that for about 6 years. But with my addiction, I made it 2 years, and then I made it 1 more year. And then I thought I could drink. I'm telling you that alcohol will get you, it's so socially acceptable and available. And I thought I could drink, and it always just led back to meth. It always led back to that drug and to the harder stuff. And so, COVID happened, and we also had some medical, issues with my youngest son that I'm gonna leave out of the video, but I took some time off work, and I'll never regret choosing to be there for my son as opposed to choosing to be at work. I wanted to show that, my work wasn't number one, he was. And, an addict with idle time and nothing to do. And then COVID happened. I had already been casually drinking, the meth came back. And it wasn't but a couple of months of me just messing up and fighting myself that I called back to the same treatment center. I went back to the same treatment center that I went to before. And I showed up, on my knees because, something's got to give. And I had to have a locked door. I couldn't just do it on my own. I had to have that locked door for a little bit of time, and so this time I stayed 3 months. This time I stayed 3 months, and this time, I feel like, I had my spiritual awakening in the beginning or there while I was there, and then after I got out. And that whenever I checked in, that time was July 13th of 2020. And so that's my clean date. I've been clean off meth and alcohol for 4.5 years now, and every day it's another day of clean time. And sorry, I know I say I a lot. I know we can cut it all out though. Let's see, where am I? So I had the relapse and I went to treatment the second time. And one thing I always say with this part is your bottom can change. It doesn't have to be the same horrible road that you go down every time. We can turn around before it gets too bad. We can recognize, hey, we're messing up, like get the help, ask for help, so during all this time, while I was there the second time, we had a Celebrate Recovery meeting at my church. And with COVID, we weren't able to go anywhere. We couldn't go to meetings. We couldn't do anything. And so I started a little Celebrate Recovery in the rehab. And everybody would come on Sunday nights, and, I had all the material. The church helped me get everything. And then after I graduated, they let me do it over Zoom with the girls for a period of time. And so I got to do a lot of giving back with the treatment facility. I got to do an art class with them for a few years, which was really neat. And I was doing NA for a while too, as far as bringing in meetings. And we even had a Zoom meeting there every single day for a while. And I threw myself into the program, into whatever program I could find myself to get into. And I know, here, I'll let you go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I just, I'm listening. I'm going to chime in here in a minute and ask some questions, but go ahead. Finish.
Okay. So anyways, I got out of treatment and I continued to work with the treatment facility, which meant a lot. I went back to the job at Sonic as a general manager, but something was different. Something spiritually was different with me, and I just wasn't willing to give up what I had worked so hard for or give up any more time with my children. I hadn't got to see my youngest very much during this time because of school and just different reasons. And so I left my keys. I walked away. I walked away from Sonic and the career I knew and the pay and everything. And I had no idea what I was going to do. And to me, God spoke to me. God worked through my life and saved me. And there was the way everything played out. Like during the spiritual awakening, I could see visions. I could see myself talking to groups of people. I could see, where. So let me back up a little bit. But because I didn't have a job or anything, I had a friend that had stayed because of whatever reason. Her electricity was out, I think. And she said, "Why don't we post online about cleaning houses?" And I was like, "Girl, have you seen my house? I'm not the one to have cleaning houses, and especially like with my trauma, I spent a lot of years just crying and cleaning, because I would be so upset." And so I was like, "I don't know about that, but I'm a hard worker, man. I really am." And so I was like, "I'll do it." I'll do it. Well, don't you know, the girl never does clean with me. And now I've had Clean Chicks OKC for 4.5 years. And so I've been running my own cleaning company since all of that. And to think that I'm actually like being paid to be a professional cleaner. And hi, clients, I hope y'all don't see this. No, I'm just kidding. But to think that I'm a professional cleaner is amazing. It's totally mind-blowing.
Don't ever let nobody, don't worry about what other people have to think about the person that you were. You know what I mean? Because of the person you are today is because of the person you were, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Those characters weren't just handed to you overnight. Nobody woke up and said, "Here you go. Renee, this is who you are going to be tomorrow." You know what I'm saying? That was a long generational thing of things that happened in your life to make you the person you are today. I always say that. Even in my video, I said the same thing. I always ask everybody if they could go back, what would they do? But, like for me, I shared the same thing. Like, I don't think I would go back to change very much. You know what I'm saying? I didn't have my kids until I was sober. So for me, I wouldn't have changed a whole bunch. I wouldn't have had my children. So that alone, I wouldn't have done that. But, the person you are today, now you're proud, you're a business owner. You know what I'm saying? These are things to be proud of, man.
Yeah, I'm excited about my life today. I get to be present with my kids. I can control my schedule. If the kids are sick, I can reschedule my appointments, and I don't have to worry about anybody yelling at me or being mad at me. If whatever it might be, I can work around with my schedule today. And that's a blessing. Before, I was working 50, 60 hours a week, if not more. And never home. And that's affected my kids' schooling and my kids' lives, and so I get to be there today, and I also get to be a part of my church and to be, somebody that gets called on if somebody needs help. They know they can come to me. We work with a nursing home right now. We're working on getting back into a rehab facility. They closed the one that I went to, but we've got so many different things in the works that is just trying to do good for other people. And that's where I get my high at, my fulfillment. I get so much fulfillment from helping other people today, and I live my life by the principles, and the 12 steps. I've got to look at my part, keep my side of the street clean. Am I in a meeting every day? No. But do I talk to my higher power every day? Yes. Do I have to focus on my recovery every day and choose not to drink or use today? Yes. Sometimes do I have to do it 1 minute at a time? Yes. Do I have to be picky about the people I have around me and the people I choose to bring into my life? Yes. Even more so now,
And that's a big one, that's a big one that, I want to share with you too. And I know it sounds like you got a pretty good, base down, and that's the big thing I tell everybody on here. The big thing is having a solid foundation, remembering that you're the addict, no matter where you go, California, Oklahoma, anywhere you go, Renee's still there. You know what I mean? So that's the big thing is we can run state to state and we want to get away from this, but you're not getting away from nobody. You're going to be there. And if you're not done, you're going to find it because drugs are everywhere. You know what I mean? It's just as accessible as alcohol is, you know what I mean? If not more, to be honest with you. So it's like that, and that's the big thing to remember, because no matter how many years we have in recovery, we're only good as the company we keep. And that's a big one. I tell my children that. I raised my children on that. You're only good as the company you keep. You keep shit company, you're gonna be shit. And that's just the bottom line. You got to keep. The recovery is a lonely business. It really is. And you hope to help find happiness, make some memories along the way, do the right thing, and keep pushing. That's the big one. Because not every day's easy.
No, and I got to continue to live my life in a way that shows my kids there is a way out if they ever have problems. They'll know where to go and what to do. I hope they don't ever have to battle that. But I'm sure my mom wished I wouldn't have had to battle it, and I did. And so the reality of this is it is a generational thing, and through a higher power, or who I choose to be called God. We can break those curses and we can do something different for our children. It didn't have to be the same old stuff. And, I'm just glad, I've struggled a lot with family, with just feeling like I didn't have family. And now, I have my own little family, I have my boys and I have me, and we're happy today, and that's all I can ask. That's it. And they know mom's clean and sober, and they knew when I wasn't. Yeah.
And that's a good thing, because, you're going to do big things. You know what I mean? Because now Renee loves Renee. You know what I mean? That's the hard part, is when we don't love ourselves, it's hard to even love any. Okay.
It is. And it's taken a lot of therapy. I've been in weekly therapy for 4.5 years now. I stay connected with a spiritual, like a mentor, like spiritual mentor every month, if not every other month. And recently I cleared my plate of everything I was doing to focus on my children, and if it wasn't for recovery and God, I wouldn't be able to do that. My focus would be on getting high and drunk, and my kids would be raising themselves.
And the big thing to remember is that it can happen at any moment. You know what I mean? So you got to be very, very cautious of your moves. But I'm very proud of you, and so, to hear your story. It really is. I love of all, when you're hearing all that stuff you went through, and then to it happens. You know what I'm saying? You get it together, and then until you're ready to be done, you won't be done. You know what I'm saying? And that's a lot what I heard in your story. You're like, you think you're ready, but you're not. You know what I mean? It sucks.
You're not.
Yeah, really.
It does, but there's always, we can always change our mind, and we can always go a different direction. It doesn't matter what we did yesterday. It doesn't even matter what we did 5 minutes ago, as long as we're focused on something good now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I want to do is, if it's okay with you, I will post these pictures up at the end of this video when I go to edit it. Okay. And also what I'll do with you is, like I talked to you about, I'll go ahead and have me and you go through the pictures, and we'll fix it. And I'll get those up for you on here. If you don't mind, I want to put you on the list to call you back on here. Here maybe like at the end of the summertime is probably like right when the summer ends, probably would be a good time. I'll start going back and doing some of these videos that I have some other interviews that I've done that where, you know, people have 3-4 years cleaning, 5 years, 10 years. And what I want to do is I want to go in there, and if you don't mind, I'd like to go in there and then let's talk about, you know, since you've been clean, you know, the last 5 years that you've been going through. And then that allows the people to know, you know, hey, you know, we do recover, but you know, you got to understand, you got to be really headstrong to keep pushing, because especially being involved with God and stuff, you know what I mean, in the Bible and stuff like that, you're gonna be tested, you know what I mean, and you got to be ready for ready for whatever comes your way. So I'd love to meet back up with you on here and go do another interview with you, and let's talk about and where you're at in your job and how your company's doing. What'd you say the name of your company was again?
Clean Chicks OKC LLC.
It's out of
Oklahoma City. Yeah,
that's good stuff. Yeah. So, I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here, and then I'll get with you, and then we'll get together on those pictures. I'll post these up for everybody that's watching this video. I'll post those up. I'm gonna try to put them in the video as we speak here and there. Maybe flash them in here and there. Worst case scenario, if I just don't like the way it comes out, I'll throw them at the end of the video and just.
Okay, and that's fine. And if there's ones that you don't want to post, that I totally understand.
I'll post everything that you give me for everybody to see, so they can put this storyline together for themselves as well. What I really would love to do is to post some of those, you know, those pictures during your addiction in here is what I was talking about. So it's just, I have to, with editing and stuff, it just gets confusing. I just want to make sure. Worst case.
Okay, well, if you ever do like breakout sessions or like panel or anything like that, I would love to be involved in any of that. If you ever expand and do something different like that, please let me know. I'm really digging what you're doing.
Absolutely. We love the support, you know, and we will definitely be getting your video out there. We're going to do big things, you know, we're going to change lives, and your video is going to be one of the ones that change lives. So, you know, just be happy about that as well, and know that God got you, and we got you, and we're going to take care of this for you.
Well, thank you.
Bye.